You can't replace part of the brain.
Like,
you treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
State of medtech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Breaking news. I'm headed to New York City this May to give a keynote at MD&M East. That's the East Coast hub for medical device advanced and critical manufacturing excellence. This is going to be an amazing event from May 20th to the 22nd. I'm going to give you little details on the keynote I'm delivering, but let me tell you a little bit about this event, why it's going to be so unique. First of all, it's being hosted at the legendary Javits Center in Manhattan. This is where 60,000 plus medtech professionals, top tier engineers, global decision makers, they're all going to converge together to build the future. If you're in medical devices, this is our industry's Super Bowl. And even though we just started May, there's still time for you if you want to exhibit at this event. I highly recommend it. Look at it like this, okay? The headquarters of 11 of the world's 20th largest companies in our industry, they're in New York, okay? There's over $500 million in medtech venture capital investment in New York, and the manufacturing employment of about 60,000 medical device professionals in New York. Not to mention the fact that this is a global conference. I, for one, have confirmed there are people in my network who are founders, CEOs from Europe and Asia attending this event. Now, real quick, let me tell you about my keynote and give you a special promo code that's going to get you in for free along with some other goodies. So I'll be talking on Wednesday, May 21st at 12:30 p.m. for a special keynote that I'm calling The Third Wave, the Future of Big Tech and MedTech. In it, I'm going to break down AI, big tech, and software, first thinking about transforming product development and R&D, but more importantly, this new partnership about the third wave of technology. This isn't just theory, it's a new playbook for medtech leaders to win. It's going to be such a good talk. I've been putting a lot of time and effort into it, and if you've been to any of my talks or seen me on YouTube, you know I'm pretty entertaining on stage. Now, to take advantage of this, you can either check the show notes below and click that link, or go to the website MDM, as in Medical Device Manufacturing East. That's MDMEast.com. Sign up, use the code OMAR25. This will get you a free expo pass and the opportunity to see my keynote. Plus, you're going to get a big discount on any workshops that you want to attend. Plus, if you're wanting to exhibit, I highly recommend you take advantage of it. I know they have a few exhibit spots left. Go ahead and go to mdmeast.com and reach out to them so that you can find a way to exhibit at this event. You don't want to miss it. I can't wait to be there. I'll see you all in New York City. And now let's get back to the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the episode. One of the things that LSI did such a great job of is bringing together, private family offices to talk about how they invest in companies. One of the problems though is that when I talk about family offices, like nobody really knows who these people are or what offices are out there. So our guest today, really special background, unique, and a good friend of mine. We're going to have such a blast. You're going to love her. So that's Ivanny Franklin. Let me give you a little bit of a background on her. So Ivanny Franklin and her family were the owners and founders of NAMSA. If you don't know about NAMSA, NAMSA is one of the largest and I think one of the oldest clinical research organizations. Great organization. They do an amazing job mainly on developing clinical trials for you, managing the data, and more importantly, I think de-risking your company. If you haven't heard about them for some crazy reason and you're a founder, I really encourage you to go check them out. You can go to NAMSA.com. That's NAMSA. N as in Nancy, NAMSA.com. You can learn more there. And so when they started NAMSA, they ended up exiting it, right? So Ivanny is a service provider over NAMSA. They exited to private equity. So upon doing that, right, Ivanny could have just sort of sat back and enjoyed life, but she decided to double down and spend more time in the industry, which we're really grateful for. We want more talented people like Ivanny involved. So currently she's still involved in NAMSA as a global clinical strategy director, but she also set up a family office. So she is, I'm going to say, a one of one in the world as somebody who's a medtech investor, but also a service provider that could provide value to, startups. And again, Ivanny, I want to send it over to you in a second. The one thing I always tell founders is that, hey, if you're going to take somebody's money is kind of a commodity these days. I know it's hard to come by, but it is a commodity. What is that person, that investor, going to do for you? So I'm so excited to have you on the show, Ivanny. Welcome on. And is this your first podcast?
It is, and I am blessed to be in your presence. Appreciate the opportunity. Fantastic intro, and really my goal or intention of this discussion is to help. And so I think in my role at NAMSA, so Global Clinical Strategy Director there, I've been there about a decade. I have technical expertise in molecular biology as well as in vitro diagnostics, oncology, infectious disease. I worked in a few laboratories, both in research and industry, before translating into commercial director roles over the past decade. Combining that expertise as well as what I have done with the family office, MedSite Capital, which was a spin out of the majority sale of NAMSA, allows me, I think, to help or provide maybe a unique perspective to pressure testing or preparing pitch decks, data, what to present to investors and at what stage of the funding cycle. And my hope is kind of bridging all of these gaps of the technical expertise, understanding of costs and timelines, how those should overlay and correlate to fundraising cycles, and then the different diligence and areas of expertise within that process kind of ties all together. So I have tips and tricks and some fun stories to share.
I love it.
Jokes as well. So a lot of
Perfect. And this is the right podcast. And look, you want to make this even more special. You ready for this?
ready.
Okay. It's my birthday today. So like, what more do I want?
So you waited until we were live to announce that. So happy birthday, Omar. You look
Thank you.
fun.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those who are listening, so you're gonna love Ivanny, but also Ivanny, NAMSA had a great panel at LSI about avoiding the valley of death. So I was on that panel. It was great. So that's going to publish later on the show as well. But let's get into the first thing first of all, which is after exiting NAMSA, right? What's the name of the family office you set up, and what's the story behind that before we kind of get into sort of brass tacks about things that founders should know?
Yeah, so the name of the family office is MedSite Capital. We started obviously with a group of LPs.
You guys have a website or no website?
No website yet. I like to keep it pretty private as well as who's in the network for now. And I'll talk a little bit about the strategy and the reasoning for that. But, the huge portion of the LPs within that LLC are ex-NAMSA family members, ex-NAMSA leadership, and then, LPs lead to more LPs. So we have a lot of people that are friends of the family that are interested in getting into the LC private equity space and not necessarily even within having MedTech backgrounds. And so we've used this as a really cool vehicle, this being MedSite Capital, is a really cool vehicle to deploy, educate, use a lot of our own funds, kind of push those into motion while I'm still working full-time at NAMSA, and also while many of the LPs perhaps are retired and don't want to work. So it is a really cool vehicle, or what I have found is a vehicle for putting money to work in a way where everyone can kind of do other things simultaneously. So I have a couple of different theses and verticals within MedSite Capital. If I'm doing direct investment, those check sizes are usually around 100 in the pre-seed, maybe seed space. I do SPVs of maybe 2 to 5 LPs. Average check size there between 250, 500K, more so in the seed area. And then I have had a lot of success and reliability doing syndications where I'll pull together 10 or so LPs to reach check size collaboratively of 1 to 2 million, and then syndicate with an established fund who already has best practices, promising returns, and can do all of the diligence work for us. So that's kind of my preference and my sweet spot is that syndication space. But certainly myself and everyone in the network, we all diversify depending on what the industry needs, what we're interested in, what time of year it is, and what's trending.
Fantastic. Like, as a whole, based on your experience with NAMSA, what are some of the types of investments that you personally really get excited about? Is there certain areas of tech or specialties that you personally like and get excited about?
Yeah. And so let me preface this answer with a differentiator or a benefit I have in working at NAMSA for the past 10, 12 years is that I see thousands of products every year in all of the areas that it takes to commercialize a medical device. So with that, I get both a micro and a macro perspective of industry trends, how much it costs to take a device from concept to commercialization, what are the changing regulatory environments, and those are different daily even now. What are the clinical evidence requirements with that? What is the the timelines associated with different intended use and device classification, which I really want to talk about. And so I get a nice perspective of what's up and coming, what the markets bear, what are both huge strategics and key industry leaders pursuing, because that's a NAMSA client base. I think probably our largest client base are the huge kind of repeat strategics and industry leaders. And then on the flip side of that, what are the startups focusing on? Where's kind of the future? And then how do we tie them together? Which is why I love, for example, ecosystems like what you've built here, Omar, and, Scott and Henry have done with LSI, et cetera. So in terms of what I get excited about and where I'm typically deploying, I have kind of three areas. Cardiovascular, that's primarily from my end, driven because of my LP network, many of which are ex-NAMSA, and also some of our connections to different KOLs in the industry are SMEs in the cardiovascular space. I also have had really nice success with syndicating with bigger funds in that space that are delivering wonderful returns. So I just have a lot of access to people where I can pressure test deals and have expertise on all aspects of diligence in that therapeutic area. My personal passion are in vitro diagnostics. So I love all things IVD. I love bringing science and products to the people. So OTC and point of care devices, infectious disease testing, providing better availability for that, oncology, et cetera. I'm intrinsically passionately about that. And then I really like all things health tech. I have invested less in that space, but I'm really into the digital health AI applications, how that overlays with infrastructure of hospitals, implementation of clinical trials, expediting different therapeutic areas, like, for example, utilizing AI for robotics and ortho. So those are kind of my three where I get excited.
Now, quick question, just because I want to put it into context. So NAMSA does a lot of things, but what would you say is the core competency? Like, what's NAMSA really, really known for? Because I think that'll help, put into context, what makes your family office so unique, just for the audience who may not know who NAMSA is.
Yeah, that's helpful and good context. So the business model is based on, or what makes us unique as a CRO is not only being able to provide kind of the super strong preclinical laboratory testing, which is what NAMSA was built on. That's our kind of industry leading bread and butter from 6 years ago, but also being able to provide the strategic consulting across all areas, whether that's regulatory, reimbursement, market insights, et cetera, and then full clinical trial implementation. So a lot of times sponsors work with us in the beginning where we provide that strategic advice and planning, regulatory strategies, interviewing clinicians, doing reimbursement coding, outlining preclinical testing strategy and clinical trial designs. But then also, which is why a lot of people use local consultants, for example, but also translating that into implementation, where I like to think we're a SWAT team for, knocking all of that out. And we have several case studies for this, but if you're a sponsor and all the million hats a sponsor and a developer has to wear, when you start adding in evaluating 2 to 3, maybe 4 service providers across all of these types of areas as you're commercializing, the sheer bandwidth of that and the impact that has on burn rate is pretty astronomical. So a huge value proposition of why we built the company this way is because you can work with us the entire way. And integrate as you are building. So a lot of times we'll start with a startup, and as that startup moves into seed and Series A and builds their own team, they may not want to fully outsource. They may want to have us supplement or integrate. So that's kind of a lot of what we do in the life cycle of what I just described there, is being able to adapt and grow with the client themselves.
Everybody, quick break. If you're a MedTech CEO or a product leader, you're going to want to listen to this. And I want you to imagine you're about to have a product launch. You've poured your time, your budget, your reputation into a device you're about to launch. And after all of that effort, your FDA submission, poof, gets rejected because of cybersecurity. This sounds dramatic, but it's actually not. It happens all the time to medtech companies, especially recently with everything being digitized. This happens so often because medtech companies treat cybersecurity as a checkbox when it's now a non-negotiable design pillar. The FDA's 2023 guidance didn't suggest cybersecurity, it demanded it. So if you're not ready with threat modeling, penetration testing, SBOM management, incident response, and airtight documentation, you're not launching, period. And here's what most entrepreneurs don't realize. Scrambling to fix these issues last minute can cost over $250,000 and delay your launch by months, which imagine the investment of getting delayed, right? The more you spend time in review limbo with the FDA is lost revenue, lost market share, and lost investor confidence. And yet, so many founders and entrepreneurs I talk to, they still treat cybersecurity as a postscript instead of a strategic advantage. Now, I've held off bringing this to my audience as a topic until now because there just wasn't a medtech-focused cybersecurity firm that I trusted, and that changed when I found Blue Goat Cyber. They specialize exclusively in medtech cybersecurity. They've helped companies like bioMaru, Inogen, Natera, along with nimble startups to get to market faster with a 100% FDA success rate. I had the chance to meet the founder, Christian Espinosa, and his story really resonated with me. So after he sold his first cybersecurity company, Alpine Security, Christian actually faced a personal health crisis. He ended up in the hospital, and that moment made him realize how vital and vulnerable medical devices really are, because a medical device saved his life. So he built Blue Goat to serve medtech CEOs and founders just like you. Whether you're pre-revenue or scaling fast, Blue Goat can offer fixed-free pricing, unlimited retests, and no surprises. This isn't bolt-on security. This is built in from day one. You wouldn't launch a device that hasn't been clinically validated, so why would you risk launching one that's vulnerable to attack? Blue Goat will secure your device, simplify your submission, accelerate your approval, and they'll do it in a way that fits your budget, your timeline, and your team. So here's what I want you to do next. Go to bluegoatcyber.com, schedule a discovery call. They do these amazing calls. They'll do an analysis with you, educate you more, because the cost of waiting could be everything that you've worked for. So that being said, go to bluegoatcyber.com and schedule that call now. Let's get back to the episode.
The question I was going to ask you, Ivanny, so you've been at NAMSA for over 10 years. For context, just last year, NAMSA saw about 270 medical device and IVD clinical trial projects, 3,000 medical device and IVDs manufacturers who were supported last year, and about 118,000 tests conducted just last year. You've been there over a decade. The reason why I mentioned that, those are really big numbers. And so at that level of scale, with that level of data, you're going to start seeing some patterns and trends. So that translates over to your family office at MedSite and how you like to invest. What are some of the most common reasons why you might pass an investment and say no to a founder based on some of the data that you're seeing at NAMSA?
I love this question, and I'm so excited to talk about it. So there are a couple of things that I'm looking for in diligence. And when I started in this space several years ago, or a few years ago, I engaged some peer mentors in the field who have similar investment deployment strategies. And I started to learn, okay, what are you evaluating in your diligence? And I started to see a void in evaluation of regulatory strategy and clinical strategy and reimbursement coding. And I want to talk about those kind of couple areas. I saw a bit of a void there, a huge focus on, market share and potential exit strategies, evaluation of the founding team and general commercialization plans and all of that. But when I'm looking at an investor, I'm reviewing a pitch deck, whether that's through any of the vehicles I described at the beginning of the discussion, being, pre-seed, seed, and Series A is kind of where I focus. Immediately, I'm going to use a couple of examples in comparing a 510K, de novo, and PMA. We'll focus on the United States for now. So if a sponsor, if an innovator cannot tell me, even at pre-seed, I might be out. If they have not done enough regulatory strategy to come to that conclusion, whether they're a 510K, de novo, or PMA, that's an immediate red flag for me. They don't necessarily have to have engagement with FDA yet, but minimally engagement with some kind of provider like NAMSA, where they've done some regulatory strategy and assessment to make sure that that intended use and the indications for use of that product are directly and clearly aligned with a particular regulatory pathway at FDA. And the reason for that is the clinical evidence requirements and statistically the timeline to market associated with that clearance or approval are on a scale of 10x. So I had one I was evaluating. It was a diagnostic, and they had a lot of avenues that they could go with the technology, and cancer was one of them. And, they had told me they were going to be a 510K. And immediately in my experience at NAMSA, I know, okay, if you're making a cancer claim, FDA is going to determine that device classification based on the level of risk associated with the diagnosis. You're 9 out of 10 times you're going to be a PMA, and they had an improperly identified predicate. Now, not all investors may know enough in their evaluation, but that was kind of alarming to me, or a red flag for me, that founder was presenting that information and had not done that diligence. In addition to that regulatory strategy, I think as you move more into seed, understanding the clinical trial design is huge for me, because clinical trials can range, if you do need, especially prospective clinical data, those can be $1 million without site and subject fees, or 10 million plus. And as an investor, I want to know what is it? Is it, that's going to impact how much I invest and how long it takes for you to get, the return on my investments. And I want to be confident that you can do that.
What kind of companies, for the audience who's listening, like, what would determine a $1 million clinical trial with site and subject fee versus like a $10 million one? Like what, like if I told you, like, hey, Ivanny, here's this kind of company, you automatically are like, oh, this thing's going to cost a lot of money.
Yep.
Like, how do you know?
So there's kind of 3 ways to do that. One is therapeutic area. So there are correlations to, depending on the risk of the device, FDA is going to require different amounts of data for that, or whether you can leverage data from real world evidence, for example, instead of doing a big prospective pivotal study. So in addition to the therapeutic area, the classification, which is why I brought up regulatory at first. The clinical evidence requirements for a PMA or a de novo, which is class 2, versus a 510K or some device where you can claim substantial equivalence. But that's what's going to be driving a huge range of or discrepancy of costs, whether you're like $1 million to $10 million, for example. So that classification then is determined not only by that therapeutic area, but the intended use of the product. So here's red flag number 3 for me, or where NAMSA spends a lot of our time providing consulting to clients, is refining that intended use statement. So you have to support, the sponsor, the developer has to support whatever claims you make in that statement. And what I see a lot of sponsors do, or developers and innovators, is, yeah, the tech is beautiful, or the platform has so much potential, it can do X, Y, and Z. You have to generate claims to substantiate all of that. And so what I want to see is a clearly defined sequential strategy on how you're going to refine that intended use so that you can get those claims fast enough so that you can get to market quickly, and run, perhaps a smaller overall pivotal trial, but also defend market share. And so a lot of the consulting we do, for example, is helping sponsors prioritize that or refine that intended use statement so that they can generate claims but still maintain differentiation so that that trial design is tight but will be accepted by FDA, for example, and then go back and come up with another strategy or show me a strategy of, how you're going to add on claims or build a pipeline from there. So that conciseness is also, for me, a good indicator that the founder understands the impact on that. To your point, or our point here, it could be, I'm talking about a simple clinical trial, 1 to 10 million. There are a whole other slew of costs involved in addition to that.
Got it. That makes sense. Now, I do want to ask you this one question, because again, like you straddle these two areas, which is one as a service provider at a really large, CRO like NAMSA, who's, by the way, I think Archimed was who acquired
majority shares in 2020, and we love Archimed. They're out of Lyon. It's a big PE firm in this space,
and focused in med, right?
Yep.
So,
you got it.
so it's part of their big PE flywheel in terms of their platform. So here's my question to you: is like, having a family office, the way that you have it set up, a key tension for a lot of like next generation stewards of family capital is like, how do you balance legacy preservation with like innovation and risk taking? Or does that even come to mind for you?
By legacy preservation, do you mean preservation of funds that came through from the acquisition?
No, but in the sense that like, the NAMSA family, right, created a great legacy through NAMSA, right? So you want to always continue that on, and there's always this thought of like making the right investments and everything. So like, does that ever come into
Yes.
you know what I mean? Because you just started
Yes.
this family office. So I'm curious, like, share the details. What is this like?
Yeah. And I am not going to lie.
I mean, I'm picturing sometimes when I think of family offices, the show Succession.
Okay, and I tell people I also relate to that very heavily. Yes, and it is.
So like I
yes.
picture the father in that thing when he's talking to the kids, and he's like, "You are not serious people." So I'm always picturing those kind of conversations within these family
It's
offices.
funny that you reference that. Yeah. So, I'm not going to lie, it's stressful because this is a new thing that my family experienced, a new thing that NAMSA experienced, and then a new opportunity for how we can make an impact on the medtech industry, which is a huge, mission and value of our company and why we started 60 years ago. So, that has been an unexpected, not self-imposed pressure where I feel responsible for how I manage their money. And the expectations I set with them, which is how I started. And Jayon, I hope you're listening to this. Jayon Wang and Owen Willis, those are my two MVPs for the beginning for,
I love those guys. Shout out to them.
Yeah, a huge shout out to them. So for learning how to do this properly and effectively and connecting me with other people that have helped me do the same. But what I found is a solution for myself, because I also am working full time doing other things like YouTube, building, and trying to contribute to the industry. But what I found was a way to de-risk, but also have a vehicle to deploy was the syndication route. Because let me tell you why. I don't charge fees when I go that route on my end. And my diligence is associated with evaluating a fund, an established fund. So the first one I chose, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, well, anyway, the first one I chose, very strong cardiovascular focused fund.
Venture fund. Your
venture fund. Yep, you got it. Who's on Fund 5. Leaders of the fund are strong KOLs. And I evaluated them, amongst the diligence of, what funds 1 through 4, how did they perform? How is Fund 5 performing now? And in addition to the payment terms, how do you reach those levels of success? What is your thesis and strategy, et cetera? And so I just did diligence on that fund, on the VC. And I brought that back to my LPs, and I was responsible only for really conveying the information and providing an educated suggestion on how much we deploy and how we do that. And then I provided all of the steps for us to be able to move it. And so for me, that relieved a lot of stress and risk, because if that fund fails, if that VC, it fails, it's not necessarily because of me, right? It's not like I made the wrong choice in a founder or in tech or whatever. That's their
and I guess for you de-risked your investment because you're essentially getting people who are KOLs in the space. They have a track record and everything, so that helps.
Track record. Yeah, track record, KOLs, and on their board they have, for example, ex-CEOs of all of the strategics and that's a beautiful strategy because all of these companies they invest in, they just call up Bob, ex-CEO of Medtronic. I'm using that arbitrarily, and they say, hey, here's a cool one, buy it, and they do. So they've got their diligence down, they've got their connections, they've got the experience and track record, and they're well established.
And it's a super important thing, by the way, and just so people understand, like what Ivanny is referring to, like about having ex-CEOs and everything, is that an ex-CEO, either an ex-CEO of a strategic or someone who has sold multiple times to a strategics, understands the pathway and what's necessary and what those strategics are looking for. Great example, big shout out to our good friend Ray Cohen, who's the former CEO of Axonics, sold that to Boston Sci for $3.7 billion, and then within 9 months took another company public and then sold Sonovi to Boston Sci, I think for $400 or $500 million. I think $600 million, after all is said and done with like milestones and stuff. But he's essentially built this pathway as an executive and now like somebody who sits on different boards, that he knows the pathway of what Boston Scientific is looking for in terms of a good acquisition target. So I think that's extremely helpful to sort of assess.
So that helped, in the beginning, kind of going back to your question, because I think a lot of the people I have met, and we started millennial medtech, right? So we can joke about what that is, after this. But a lot of the people I have met that are similar in age or situation, many of them are founders that have exited, and so now they're trying to decide, okay, how do they move into the investment space as well? It might not necessarily be a family office. In most cases, I am meeting 35-year-olds that are multimillionaires and they want to start moving into this space. And it's not like they were trained on this area of diligence or this method. They're obviously strong in multiple of different business strategies and areas of therapeutic expertise, etc. Brilliant minds, but this is a unique space to get into. And so what I've done even too with that is we've done some SPVs together where we might pool, 1 to 50, maybe close to 5, and kind of learn with each other on investing in a particular area through a smaller vehicle versus, a big syndication with a fund. And that is a good way, A, to learn, B, make connections. Many of those, depending on the partner you choose, will allow you to have board seats as well, where you can have impact and contribution depending on, whatever area of expertise you have, both on the business side or therapeutically as well. So that's a cool way. If you're a founder or if you're new to family office, that's another way I learned that it's still de-risking everything, but it also allows an avenue for learning and adapting so that when you feel comfortable with maybe some of the direct investment, which is where I'm at now, that translate. Those are all different business strategies with what family and friends office or a small fund can do.
How do you decide between? And again, this is what makes your family office very unique. There's a lot of family offices that get into medtech, but they have no experience at all, so they have to go through a fund. So how do you decide between investing directly in a startup versus, say, backing a fund?
Yeah, that's a good point. I start sometimes backwards with what is my recent, how much have I asked of my LPs recently? Because I'm still working full-time at NAMSA. I don't have time to go out and hunt for new LPs. So really what I try to do is maximize the LPs that I have, leverage them, and use them wisely for these 3 different areas that we just kind of chatted about, those 3 different vehicles. So sometimes that decision is made on what is the activity I've requested of those LPs. I usually do like a syndication a quarter, we'll call that, like the bigger ones. And so if I'm looking at more of an SPV or a direct investment, I might do that on my own, or I might just choose one other. So for example, if LP number 6 was involved in 1 or 2 syndications last year, but, kind of passed on 1 or 2 recent ones, I might approach he or she and say, hey, I'm going to do a small vehicle, an SPV. I just need one other person to hit, this minimum amount. Are you interested? And I'll float it past a few of them. The direct investments, I normally do that to bid by myself. So shout out to also, while we're on that, Cardiac Care, Amir. I love that group, met them through LSI. That's going to be kind of my first avenue of kind of doing something just directly and not necessarily syndicating or using a different vehicle. And I felt comfortable with that because I was able to leverage a lot of, experts through my NAMSA network on these types of diligence we've been talking about today, the regulatory strategy, the clinical evidence. So Amir and I spoke many times about what are the data expectations that I would like to see? Where did that data come from? How did they collect it? How are they going to fund that data? What's the future data they need? Is that properly budgeted? How did they come to those numbers? Are they substantiated? Because sometimes those I see are underquoted in pitch decks. So the whole notion of, how do you evaluate a direct investment versus a fund, that's very different diligence. I'm looking at entirely different aspects and expectations from, who or what I'm investing in.
And normally for your fund, like what like check sizes are you guys usually preferring to deploy and at what stage?
Yeah, I like to do a 1 to 2 million for Series A through syndication. So not through direct, but Series A kind of with an established fund. And we do that, maybe we'll call it quarterly. We're still growing, but that's kind of maybe a good basis of activity. SPVs in between there. And that's usually between 1 and 500K, depending on level of interest and
risk. That's when you invest directly into a company.
Yeah,
and
yep. And so like by SPV, I mean, I'll pool together. I won't do like a massive syndicate, and I'll direct invest directly in an entity, but I will have a couple of folks on my back end that are pooling money into my LLC, and then I'm deploying it. So MedSite Capital is the sole LP for that type of SPV investment, which is direct to the founder. But on my back end, I have a couple. So it keeps their cap table clean, but it's something I manage on the side, if that makes sense.
Got it. Now here's like, I think the most not common. This is like the golden question every founder wants to know is, number one is like, for a family office, where do you guys source deals, and then where do you guys essentially hang out? Because like everyone's trying to see like there's no such thing as the Medtech family office meeting, and so like it's really hard to find these family offices and get in front of them. So like, how do you source deals, and then like how do you as a family office I guess attend what's that world like? Do you guys I know that there's events for family offices, but like tell us a little bit about that world.
Yeah, because MedTech, we're such a special industry. We're all so well connected. So I'm going to turn this question back to you on how can you help people get connected with family offices. So I'm going to tell you first how I do it. And then I think your whole audience would love to hear suggestions too on how can we be doing it better. So definitely, through referrals. And again, I want to be clear, my strategy, I'm doing this as job number 2. So if, my strategy might be different if I was not working full-time at NAMSA. I do see beautiful deal flow by supporting clients at NAMSA or hearing kind of buzz companies of who's up and coming. So, in speaking with strategics and supporting them, where are they investing next? Not necessarily in whom, but what areas. And so that's how I start to get an idea of the trends. And by understanding the regulatory environments as well, and then I can start to get an idea of, where's FDA going, and then thus the market that follows. LSI for me has been highly successful. MTI as well. Those two are very good at, I think those at providing conferences and developing cohorts and entities where it combines innovators, investors, service providers, strategic partners. So those have been incredible in terms of making connections. And then lastly is referrals. So, I mean, even how many did you send me this week? 6 or 7, 5 or 6 of them. So
yeah.
yeah, just so that, I'm just kind of passively always doing that. And then the last thing that I do is if it's not something I'm interested in, I'll pass it on to someone who might be. So there was one, where it was health tech, not necessarily my thesis for direct investment, but I sent it along to Owen, and that's his thesis and his bread and butter and his expertise. And, that worked well for him. Or, I had one that was super cardiovascular. I wasn't comfortable with the direct investments. I send to BioStar or whoever. So even if I pass on it, that's the whole idea of this ecosystem, I believe, is we should all be doing that. That should be reciprocal and providing feedback along the way on why or why not.
Definitely. No, I love that. Yeah. And I mean, just to kind of answer your question about like what we can do, I mean, one of the missions of like the state of MedTech, aside from, creating really rich, entertaining content for the industry to, learn from, but also to benefit from. We do a lot of marketing and sales episodes and everything. The bigger mission is, I love this industry and I think it always had a marketing problem in the sense that there's a lot of money out there in the world, but I see money being, money being deployed to things that are, not so meaningful. Like, no offense to anybody, but like investing in the next social media platform or like vertical SaaS play, like there's a lot of risk to that. Maybe there's going to be a great return. But the nice thing about this industry is it's very steady Eddie. It has a very clear path to IPO or acquisition. And at the end of the day, like if you're a family fund or, fund or office, and you have generational wealth, maybe you say, hey, let's, invest in more medtech companies that might give us a 3, 5x, 6x, 10x return, maybe not 100x, but we can take a lot of pride in the fact that our family has backed something that's going to have like meaningful impact in society. And so the one thing, at least in our world, what we try to do is we actually have a list, and I'll add you to it, of investors. So like when people come on our show, if it's like really early stage or it fits a thesis that somebody is interested in, I try and email that investor the episode and a deck to try and get them connected. But I think there are better ways to do it and scale it. I don't know what that would look like, but I'd love to
You're
somehow figure out.
though. You're doing it. That's exactly what you're doing. And on the flip side of that,
I would love to find a way to bring all the family offices together who are in medtech or interested in medtech.
Yes, in Cabo, I don't know what that could look. Or Bali. I'm thinking Bali.
I mean, sure. Cabo's closer for me. But no, yeah. I think it would be great. I think it'd be really interesting. And I think one of the things, I don't know how this could look, but like, I'd love to organize something like that where existing family offices and ones who are interested in medtech can get together, not only to meet each other, but also to learn more about the industry, maybe get, some education about what to look for in deals and stuff. Like, at least on my end, the part where I educate a lot of investors, like, here are the kind of things they need to look for on the sales and marketing side, But yeah, I don't know. Maybe
and service provider selection too is quite stressful. So, finding a partner who's reliable when the company is your baby, and these are significant investments that they're making, that's very difficult as well. A lot of our leads for startups, they come through Google. And so I think if the industry can provide, better referrals and connections, which I'm going to use LSI as an example, they've done a good job about that. They've got service providers from all over the place, globally, across all service areas, whether that's reg, reimbursement, clinical, market research, usability testing, we're all there and we're all mixing. I think we need more of that. And you do that on this podcast and this avenue as well, is, promoting different people who can help get there. So we spend a lot of this discussion on, what am I looking for from, an investor perspective, for example, but, what are the next step for a founder is, okay, how am I going to find the right partner for that? What's advice there on who is the right partner? What's the right budget? Do I, buy on speed or price, or, how do you pressure test and evaluate effectively a service provider who you're depending heavily on the success of your entire company. And so that's where, at NAMSA, we build a lot of reliability that way. But, there are other service providers in the area too that might be better fit, depending on the founder and their goals and, what their expectations are from a provider. So I think we all need to be, providing more opportunity for people to be communicating about what the options for them are.
All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Khatib & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course, using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a no name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode.
And then outside of the investor summits that you mentioned, like, are there, like, for you personally, any medical conferences that you personally really enjoy attending?
Because of my diagnostic background, they renamed, it used to be called AACC. It's ADLM now. I love that, just to see, at that point, the basis of those the companies that are there. First of all, their expo hall is, it's typically very large, but very well qualified, if you will. So what I like about the companies there is it's a perfect mix of all of the huge strategics and then all of the up and coming startups, and those that are more so kind of in the Series A range where they have clinical data. They've got perhaps clearance for one assay, if not more. And so it's kind of a sweet spot for me on kind of my NAMSA hat, in providing support and in continuing to help those companies grow, and then connecting those companies with some of the bigger strategics that are there. So ADLM, I love hugest diagnostic IBD conference, kind of, I would say globally. LSI, MTI, I love for more of the startup piece. AdvaMed is a good political one for us because they have unique attendees there from a policy making perspective, I think. So it's a really good way we typically have upper leadership. All of NAMSA's ELT team, for example, goes to that, as well as a lot of my LPs, because it provides an avenue to comment on macro changes that the industry may like to see. And how do we all work together to swing that needle? So that's a whole different vibe, a different objective. So I guess those are maybe 4 ones that I would advocate for that I do year over year. And then therapeutic conferences, if you're trying to have a nice exit strategy. So like, for example, the cardiovascular one out of New York, that's a really great therapeutically focused conference, for example, where very different intention, much more focused.
How, one thing that's starting to come more, there's Medtech and then there's this other side of tech med. So sort of a bridge between those two things would be not just software, but specifically AI. For you in the family office, like how do you guys look at Medtech companies like with AI specific applications? Is that something that you guys are interested in? And it's one of those things where it's exciting.
The buzzword. Yeah.
But there's a lot of risk to it.
Yeah. So for me personally, I'm not comfortable with the level of risk. I'm not, for a number of reasons. One, I think I don't have the statistics on hand. We might want to supplement that. But the percentage of startups that fail with that particular indication or kind of in that side of the space is statistically higher. The regulations are still being defined. I have 2 or 3 people at NAMSA on the FDA board that are literally writing the regulations for that as we speak. So the dynamics and the frequency of change is constant, more so than other areas of med device. So that's another risk, right? That, of what is FDA, for example, going to require their inundation of the space as well. I don't know enough about how to evaluate how crowded that space is. I do want to separate though AI and health tech. And this is something that kind of Owen taught me with. There are ways that you can incorporate AI into other products that support the kind of that. I think you called it tech med. I'm calling it health tech, but I think we're synonymous there. Applications that I think are pretty lucrative. So what I did, because we're talking about de-risking, was I said, okay, Owen, I'm interested in that space. I'm not going to do any direct AI investments, but here's an SPV. You do that. That's his area of expertise, right? So we'll see. Maybe we do a pod in 2 years, and I'll tell you if it worked or not.
Yeah. No, and I think it's good to hear that too, because again, I think probably the most important thing is that through this show and having investors like you on, for founders to get the education as to hey, here are the things that we should do ahead of time, to de-risk. And I think that's really the name of the game. I think back in even 10 or 15 years ago, there was a time in medtech where you can come up with a halfway decent product, get some patents around it, and then get acquired by somebody, right? Before you even go through FDA. But those days are kind of gone. I mean, that can still happen, but it's just really, really rare. So I think a lot of companies need to be prepared to go the full way, not only to go through FDA, but also commercialize their products. So the thought is how do you de-risk it? Engaging a CRO like NAMSA on the clinical trial side, figuring out for example, for my marketing agency, we work with a lot of companies pre-FDA that are pre-commercial. And the reason why is that you want to start laying that foundation early, because when you get acquired, you're not just getting a technology acquisition, but sometimes it's a business model. So sometimes when you have a good pipeline and sales and marketing processes, that gives you more leverage for valuation. So I think more companies are thinking about that, right?
Let's talk about that too for a second. I love that. So we've been focusing on reg and clinical on how that impacts diligence and investment decision making, but also clinician feedback is super important to me. And you're talking about marketing strategies, and clinician feedback can be used in a lot of different ways. In securing funding, convincing that your investors that you would have clinician adoption, and then using it to differentiate against competitors, kind of to your point there. So one thing I love, and NAMSA does this too, we have a market research arm, but we'll basically put the device in the hands of the end user, whether that's a physician or clinician or lay user or whatever, or kind of paint the picture of what the device would do differently. And we draw insights for that. So if I am reviewing a pitch deck and I see they have kind of third-party, double-blinded, data that is demonstrating for me not only the market size, but how that product is better, more efficient than standard of care, how it's going to save the hospital money. That's going to be important to payers, why it's differentiated. And I want data and clinician insights to support that. I love that. And you can do that with even 5 clinicians for I don't even know. I mean, 15 grand. We can do it slimly. I assure you that is worth it. And that for me is a lot more impactful than buying a market report, because this is primary research specific to your device. And B, I like it when it's unbiased and not from someone on your board, because obviously someone on your board thinks your device is cool, right? That's why they're on your board. So I want it to be kind of like third-party primary research. It can be very small, but if you can summarize clinician feedback, and so for example, what we do at NAMSA is we'll engage KOLs, it might be depending on the therapeutic area, or lay users if it's more of an at-home type device, right? So it's also important to me who's contributing to that data. But that I think that's a void in pitch decks that can be really impactful to the design and development of the device. Why would you go through development without what if you need to make changes to it, right? So doing that in kind of pre-seed seed time frame, so that you can make adjustments, be more competitive, market those efficiently, understand your value prop and differentiation, and then communicate that to investors. That's important. That's a void as well, I think.
Yeah. And again, like, I think it's really important for founders to hear this so that they can start thinking about it. I mean, look, you invest in these companies a lot more than I do. So you tell me if I'm wrong in saying this, but I think even if you are pre-commercial, it helps to show an investor that, like, hey, here's like an early pipeline of interest that we've had. Here's some physicians we did the demo for, even though we haven't gone through FDA, but like we have at least have a CRM with like some leads and interest that we know what to do. So even when we get money, we hire like one sales rep, we have, some like data on who we should go after. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And client profiling as well. You need to understand your market. So much of it is, I hate it when I look at a pitch deck and then they say, the market is X amount of million or X billion. And I think, my first 5 questions are, who said that? Who says that, right? So show me the data that substantiates that. So I agree that's important. It is in every pitch deck, as it should be. But I think there's a void in that primary research where you have your actual end users, providing feedback on that. I want to see that as you're developing. I want to make sure that, in addition to the 10 other things we talked about in diligence there, that's not a void. I want advocates, I want feedback, and it's okay if the feedback is bad. They can say, I don't like this interface, or this part was slow, or, I don't like your in-servicing model. Fine, great. Share that with me. I want to know then how are you going to find solutions to that? Just because the insights might not be all superb, I want to see how you overcome those types of challenges. Then I'm going to have confidence in the founding team and their ability to properly manage and adapt.
Definitely. No, I completely agree. Last thing before we let you go, Ivanny, just out of curiosity. So like, outside of your role in NAMSA and of course in investing, what do you like to do in your spare time? Are there certain books you like to read, podcasts you love? I know you're a big fan of this podcast.
This is all I do with my time. No, I'm kidding. Great. So favorite thing to do is travel, both for work and pleasure. I have the list of countries I want to go to is always growing. So I love to travel. I show horses. I show quarter horses. So I love to ride. I've been doing that since I was, I think, 3 years old. So I've got 2 horses in training where I travel throughout the US and compete. And then I've got 2 little kids. Those are 2 more full-time jobs, bring me so much joy. All of the sports activities, watching them grow. And then lastly, paddleboarding or an e-biking too. I just got an e-bike I told you about, I think.
Oh, nice.
It makes me so much. It's so happy. So now that's my new mode of transportation. So yeah,
that's
don't
awesome.
sleep much, but I love it. I always joke you can sleep when you're dead.
Well, I'm a big fan of you. Really admire the fact that you could have, especially, you have 2 kids, you could have chosen just to sort of take your exit money from NAMSA and just sit back and just like enjoy life, but you decided to double down. You're still working at NAMSA, helping companies every single year. You're actively investing in the space. So, if I can speak for the rest of us and just saying, thank you so much for like continuing to do that. We're very grateful to have somebody like you.
Yeah, likewise. Right back at you. And shout out to everything that founders have to do. I'm learning more and more every year. Well, their stress and how they do it is, amongst the most impressive people I've ever met. So I'm happy personally to support any way that I can, as is NAMSA, as are you, even if that's just talking about it like this, or providing suggestions or connections or making deployments or, providing service support. I think there's a lot of different ways we can do it. I think, the more that we speak about it, it's increases awareness and lessons learned and provides stability, I think, for growth.
Definitely. And hopefully, like through content like this, we amplify what we're doing in MedTech, bring in some more money, and get a lot of these founders the money that they need. So with that being said, if you are a listener, you enjoyed this episode, forward this on to a founder or to a MedTech CEO, anybody that you think will benefit from it. Be sure to go follow Ivanny, connect with her on LinkedIn under Ivanny Franklin. And again, if you are just learning now about NAMSA, go check out their company. By the way, NAMSA did not sponsor this episode, but they do great work. So I try and direct people to good organizations like that. You can go to namsa.com to learn more. And as always, I'm Omar Khatib. Don't forget, subscribe to the show. Give us 5 stars. We're number 1 for a reason, because I constantly remind you to do that. All right, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.